Parenting is one of the hardest jobs in the world. At times, it will make you question why you even decided to become one. Over the past 50 or 60 years, the way we parent has changed an awful lot. Many parents used to say things that parents today wouldn't even dare say. In today's video, we will have a look back at some of the things that parents used to say that would shock modern parents. At one time, fast food options weren't as readily available as they are today. Whatever your mother prepared was what you were having. Knowing that fact, it still didn't stop kids from asking what was for dinner. If she replied broccoli casserole, then you said, "Yuck, I don't want it." And her response was always, "Well, we have 2 dinner choices tonight. Take it or leave it. It's up to you." Speaking of dinner, it could also be used as a form of punishment, and especially so if it was something that you actually liked. If you were acting up, you might hear something like, "You can go to bed without dinner." At that point, you would be sent to your room, and if you were lucky, you might get breakfast the next morning. It all depended on how bad you were. Car rides back in the day could be quite boring, and this was especially true if it was a long one. There was only so much you could stand looking out the window. This was always the perfect time to start fighting with your siblings in the back seat or in the very back of the station wagon. At some point, it would lead to some yelling and fighting, and as a parent, there's nothing worse than hearing that in the car. But parents back then wanted you to know that they meant business and the threat seemed real. If you don't quit touching your brother, I'll cut your fingers off and the doctor can sew them back on. Something like that was usually said if they couldn't reach you from the front seat. And you better listen too. You certainly didn't want them to stop the car and handle business. If you were home and fighting with your siblings, then it was a different story. Basically, your parents wanted you out of the house so that you couldn't break any of the furniture. They really didn't care what happened to the 2 of you. So the most popular thing for them to say was just, "Go fight each other outside." No matter what, siblings always found something to fight over. And where you sat in the car was no exception. Car seats? Nah, most of us barely even wore seat belts. A lot of the kids would fight over who could lay in the back window or on the floor curled up so you could take a nap. So in order to prevent this from happening, it was popular for parents to say something like, "It's your brother's turn to lay in the back window." Whenever kids got disciplined, they would sometimes say, "I don't like you," or "I hate you." A lot of dads would reply with, "If your kids don't hate you by the time you're teenagers, then you're doing it all wrong." It was sort of a straightforward approach of saying it's better to be a parent rather than a friend. Chores around the house were something that everyone pitched in and did. Most of us had an assigned chore, but at any given moment we could be asked to do something additional. This additional chore was not optional, and it really wasn't a paid position either. If you asked what you got for doing it, then you probably heard something like this: "You'll get to live another day. That's what you'll get." One thing that parents couldn't tolerate was a temper tantrum, and this was especially true if it involved crying. Crying when you're hurt is one thing, but otherwise no one wanted to hear it. How many times did you hear, "If you don't cut that out, I'll give you something to cry about"? The last thing that you ever wanted to do was make your dad mad while the family was out to dinner. If you did that, then you probably heard this: "Do you want to go outside?" No, sir, because outside there were no witnesses. If you saw a kid going outside with his dad in a restaurant, then he was probably doing the little lip-sucking thing, and everyone knew that he was about to get his butt whooped. Back then, parents weren't afraid to do a little corporal punishment. They would give you a warning before it happened. "You're cruising for a bruising." If you don't take heed, then it was certainly going to get worse. Dads could pull off their belt in a flash, while mom probably preferred the wooden spoon. If dad had shorts on or some other kind of outfit without a belt, then the punishment got worse. Did you ever hear, "Go pick out a belt"? This was like psychological warfare. If you picked out one of mom's crocheted belts, then they would send you right back to pick out another one after they hit you with it. If you picked out one of dad's heavy-duty ones, then it was certainly going to break your back. But you had to make it quick or you would really be in for it. When it was finally time to get your lickings, what is one of the things that you most likely heard? This is going to hurt me a whole lot more than it's going to hurt you. Parenting was a lot different back in the day. Got a fussy baby? No problem. Put some beer or whiskey in her bottle and that'll help her sleep. That was usually a grandparent's advice and they would give it to any new parent. They weren't kidding either and they had done it to their kids. When our parents were at work, we were not allowed to call them. They gave us specific instructions. Don't call unless someone is dead or the house is on fire. For the most part, kids were expected to handle their own problems. Parents never wanted to hear one kid tattling on the other. On weekends after our chores were done, we were usually given specific instructions. Go outside. Go to the park and don't come back until it gets dark. That is the very reason why we learned that the garden hose had the best water you could ever drink. We weren't allowed back in the house to use the sink. It used to be up to the kids to get to the places that they wanted to go. They either walked or rode a bike there and then back home. If you ever asked them to go with you, you probably heard something like, "You're a big boy or a big girl, you can get there by yourself." Today, kids seem to be chaperoned by their parents or driven there. And if you ever missed the school bus, there was no question you would be walking home. Got a loose tooth? No problem. Parents always had a solution to take care of it. They may have told you just to tie a string around your tooth, tie the other end to a doorknob, and then slam the door. It would certainly work if the tooth was ready to come out, but that didn't mean that it wasn't traumatizing. For the most part, our parents tried to teach us manners. Did you ever hear, "Children should be seen, not heard"? Most parents learned this from their parents. What it really meant was if you have something important to say, then wait till the grown-ups are done talking and then say it as politely as possible. As kids, we didn't have protective gear to keep us safe. Parenting was pretty much a hands-off approach. Usually the dad would tell the mom, "Oh, let him get hurt. It'll teach him not to do that again." And you know what? They were right. It was always a good hard lesson to learn. Sadly, many girls in the distant past were not encouraged to do well in math and science. If they did, then it was fine, but if they struggled, then no problem. Parents in those days said, "Who cares if she fails math? She's just going to be a mom." Thankfully, this is something that has changed. If your parents ever heard you say a curse word, then they probably said, "I'm going to wash your dirty mouth out with some soap." And they weren't kidding either. That's an experience that you'll never forget. Parenting may have changed a lot over the years, but it does sometimes make us wonder, were the parents of yesteryear better or are the parents of today too soft? What are some of your thoughts and what are some of the things that your parents used to say? Let us know in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching.